I'm Scruffy Eevee, and I've been creating a Pokemon webcomic called Super Short Eevee Comic, or SSEC, for over a decade now. And I'm rebooting it. Completely starting it over. From scratch! Hard reboot. Not going back. Everything's on fire. Now, I know this must be surprising, especially since I literally said I don't want to reboot SSEC. But after a whole 2 years of reflection, I decided that it would be best for both me and the readers if I were to completely reboot it. And I wanted to make this video to explain why this reboot needs to be done for me to keep making SSEC content. In 2020, I started writing other stories. This started as me just trying to explore and experiment with writing, trying out different ideas just for fun. But then I started to explore an old story I had called The Evolves. From then till 2023, I spent a lot of time working on its story. But as time passed, I realized I was using Evolves as an escape from writing SSEC. And that made me stop and ask myself, why? Why was I enjoying Evolve so much more than SSEC? How can I make writing and drawing SSEC as fun as it was with the Evolves? When was the last time I had fun writing SSEC? And asking those questions made me realize something very important. I wasn't really enjoying SSEC at all, really. Honestly, SSEC kinda stressed me out, not gonna lie. I thought back to all the times where I'd sit at my computer not wanting to draw, but like posting it weekly anyways, or the countless of times where I'd rant to my friends about SSEC. The story, the characters, the plot lines. Something was off, and I wanted to fix it desperately. In a post from 2023, I talked about how I wasn't happy with the direction of the series, and haven't been since 2019. Over the years, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to improve the comic, making it more enjoyable to both read and write. I sought out criticism and took advice from people, redrew pages, and even changed my approach to writing SSEC. But ultimately, all of my efforts failed. And it all failed due to the same reason. SSEC was started by a very edgy middle schooler, and I was trying to stay true to this edgy child unplanned method of the story. What does this mean? Well, the deeper I looked into improving SSEC, the more I realized that the biggest problem was the foundation itself. These cracks have been there since the beginning, and the further I went into the story, the more they grew. Every plot hole I tried to patch in an attempt to try and make sense of this jumble of ideas only created a convoluted, confusing mass of half-baked ideas and overcomplications. Things like angels and devils existing, weird shipping implications, and Nego's whole existence. I either had to address these or watch as the story stops making sense entirely. Which didn't even work because most people don't even understand the story anyways, and I don't even blame them for that due to the amount of retcons, plot changes, and just pure mess in the story due to me over the years trying to fix what I wrote when I was 14. So, what are the problems with SSEC? Well, let's start off with the biggest issue in the series. The characters. Now, most of the characters are pretty well developed, except Dawn Rebozo. The problem? I developed them at the start of the series with no real goals in mind, neither for the story nor for them as characters. Because of this, many of their actions and decisions were made on the fly, without really considering how it would impact the characters around them or the future of the story. This issue is most obvious with Dusk. He started off as this cute, silly, goofy Umbreon character, but he somehow evolved into this evil mastermind that causes most of the problems in the series. Now, while I don't hate this version of him, it was not intentional. At first, his influence on the world was just background detail, small things I added in without much thought. But as the story went on, fans started noticing just how much control he had over the Eevee box. And the more they pointed it out, the more I felt like I had to justify it. So instead of stepping back and reevaluating Dusk as a character, I doubled down on these points, turning him into a character I never really intended him to be. And let me reiterate, Why was it there? Because I put it in without thinking about the consequences. Without realizing it, I made Dusk the scapegoat for all of the world-building problems in the series. If something needed an explanation or didn't make sense, I tied it back to him. Why was the Brotherhood system so unbalanced? Dusk created it when he was 12. Why was the education system for Eevees a mess? Dusk was sabotaging it. Why did only the Green Paw Brotherhood have proper resources while the other Brotherhoods had nothing? Dusk refused to help the other Brotherhoods while spoiling his own. And on, it just kept spiraling until I looked back and saw that Dusk wasn't just a morally great character with some questionable decisions. He was the reason so many of the cast suffered. By the time I started planning later arcs, I realized something very unsettling. Someone like Dusk couldn't just walk away from all of this. He had to have a downfall. His actions were too severe to brush off, even if some of them were funny. There was no realistic path for redemption, not when he had been the root cause of so much pain. No matter how much I cared about him as a character, the others in the cast would rightfully hate him. He didn't just make mistakes. He built an entire system that just hurt those around him. And the worst part about all of this wasn't some grand intentional villain arc. Dusk was the villain of SSCC, and all of this happened by accident. Before you get out your pitchforks, I can explain. Dusk's need for control comes from fear. Fear that if he lost control again, everything would fall apart, that more Eevees would end up in the lab, that Harmony would win, that he and the Pokemon he loved would suffer all over again. You see, Dusk spent his whole life being controlled by his mother, by the lab, by people who hurt him and the ones he cared about. Escaping gave him his freedom back, but in his desperation to hold on to it, he became the very thing he feared the most. Dusk thought controlling everything would keep everyone safe, but instead it only caused more harm, and his arc in SSCC would have not just had him lose control of the Eevee box. He would have lost the trust, the friendships, and the future he could have had with everyone. His downfall was earned, due to his actions, due to his reluctance to let go of control, due to his fear. And all of that deep, complex, emotionally charged backstory, yeah, that was made up around page 274. The consequences of me writing characters without any goals whatsoever and having to explain their actions after the fact. These consequences didn't just affect Dusk. They affected the entire cast, and not in a good way. Flame was made so incredibly depressed that there was no reason to add him into any of the story, causing people to heavily misunderstand his character. They turned into an absolute jerk, a bully, and a corrupt cop, which was again completely accidental. And don't even get me started on Daisy, because why did I randomly make her a secret agent? It makes no sense. Not only that, but why did she almost kill Sora? I'll tell you why. Shock value, yes! That was the only reason. I made a decision to make her nearly kill Sora while drawing the page itself to add drama. And to cut off Sora's neck bow because I thought it was annoying Kira. When people were unsurprisingly upset about this, I freaked out and made a, oh no guys, look, Sora's actually fine! Page to backpedal as fast as possible. Now, if I were to continue SSEC, Miku, who is Sky and Sora, would rightfully be terrified of Daisy. And I never even considered that when I had Daisy slash a sword through Miku's throat for no reason. Of course, I had to make a reason later on when I realized that this would be the case. But can you see the pattern? And you know what's just as important as the characters? The world they live in. Well, guess what I also didn't plan? Buckle up, cause now we're diving into SSCC takes place in a digital world made to house the Pokemon that trainers store in the PC, sort of like a Minecraft world. The problem? Well, this digital world has almost no real differences from the overworld. Like, if you read a chapter of SSCC, would you believe that they were in a digital world? I mean, yeah, some things are a little odd, but the Pokemon don't act like they're in a digital world at all. They still carry items in their paws instead of using their inventory spaces. They still do things like write on paper. They can only even access things like the internet through computers while being in a computer. There are barely any structures or indications that their world is artificial unless you read the text that states it. And the result? The PC, which should be one of the main draws of the series, ends up feeling limited and weirdly not PC-like. The characters are supposed to be living in this digital world with literally limitless potential, but I never really put any deep thought into that world itself until Chapter 25. On top of that, the world is just empty. As I mentioned before, I tried to explain this away by blaming Dust story-wise, but that was really just a cover-up for my own shortcomings as a world builder. To really appreciate the chaos in SSCC, you'd have to look at how I structured it all. Spoiler alert, I didn't structure anything. You see, SSCC isn't just a character-driven mess in a vague digital world. It's also slow. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, let me introduce you to the true villain of SSCC. The pacing! The pacing. SSCC's pacing is absolutely atrocious. And it just highlights the issues with the characters even more. For example, let's take Blizz. Poor Blizz spent most of the series just existing. I had no idea what to do with him. That is, until around 2019, where I finally made vague goals for the characters. To my surprise, only then did Blizz start having actual character focus. 8 years after I started the comic. He's supposed to be the protagonist. And yes, Blizz from comic number 1 was always supposed to be the protagonist of SSCC. I started the comic with a concept of a crazy Glaceon being the main character, and then Blizz proceeded to be in the background, outshined by Dusky Boy until Dusky Boy went to go get milk. So technically, the story didn't even start until around 2019. Now, to put into perspective just how bad the pacing in the comic is, the entire plot and backstory of SSCC was originally made just to add a Sylveon character to the main plot. And in case you haven't noticed, Miku is still not in the main story, and it's been over a decade. I now have dedicated arcs for each character, but because I developed all the characters separately, there were a lot of weird disconnects. For example, every main character was connected to the lab, except Dawn, who, due to this, never got any screen time and relevance. And this doesn't stop with her, because let me tell you, Bolt is a devil angel magical girl with heterochromia. Yes, that was his power. That he could turn into a magical girl to defeat gods, and his plot would have had him defeating an evil Meowth creature who wanted to suck all of his spirit energy from him. While this is hilarious, what does this have to do with the story? Speaking of the story, SSCC also suffers from tonal whiplash. And there is a perfect example of this. The latest chapter. We go from Eve being kidnapped by rubber combustion-wielding Jigglypuff and being crowned Queen Rainbow Poop to Daisy having a trauma-induced panic attack that leads to a bloody flashback of whatever is going on here. While this is an extreme case, SSCC is filled with this, causing a huge disconnect in tone. The funniest part, I don't even want to write dark stories. I avoid horror like the plague. But all of this comes from the edgy backstory I wrote when I was a teenager that I had to develop. And while I do love all of my characters, the lack of cohesiveness leads to constant jumping back and forth, making SSCC incredibly hard to write. This also leads to connecting plot points being several chapters apart, requiring me to slowly thread together dozens of chapters just to reach a single plot point. And you know, here's a fun fact. At the current pace, it'll take at least 12 more years to finish the series. You heard me right, 12 more years. I'd literally be drawing SSEC in my rocking chair at the nursing home, bro. That's a huge time commitment to a story I'm not even satisfied with, especially considering the changes I want to make. At this point, you might be thinking, why not just give up? SSCC is just a dumpster fire. Can it even be fixed? Well, I'm stubborn. People have praised me for sticking with SSCC's story for so long. But honestly, I knew it was a dumpster fire for years. I first made it when I was a middle schooler after all. There are a lot of awful things I put in it that I didn't understand the implications of as a child, and I now just look back and sigh in disappointment and horror. My stubbornness to persevere is the only reason why I kept this mess of a story going for so long, but even I have a limit. And after years of trying to fix SSCC, I decided the best way to fix it is to completely reboot it. So with that, here are the changes! Okay, so what is actually changing in the reboot? Cause like, there are a lot of changes. Well, first of all, the entire format is getting changed, cause the reboot will be a web series. Yeah, the reboot might not even be a comic. I'm still deciding on the format, but I'm leaning towards making it a YouTube series. This is because I originally got into evolution stories by watching evolution videos on YouTube. So I want to go back to my roots. I feel like making it a web series would make it more accessible to people as well. Plus, I just really like video editing. Of course, making it a web series will require a bit more work than keeping it as a comic, but I think it'll be worth it. And I have a plan. Honestly, if I wasn't in my webcomic phase when I first created SSCC, it probably would have been a YouTube series from the start. And since it's not a comic anymore, the reboot will be getting a new name. Stupid Short Eevee comic is pretty cool, not gonna lie. But the comic part doesn't make much sense if it's a web series. So far, I've been calling it by its codename, Box 31, but that's not the official name. The name for the reboot is... Stupid Silly Eevee Drama! Or for short, SAID. I know. I'm great at names. This took me a year to come up with. Alright, let's move away from this stuff and dive deeper into what really matters. The story changes. SAID revises SSCC's plot, changing certain elements to deliver SSCC's story in a hopefully more understandable way. SSCC's plot was honestly very bloated. It had so many different plots, powers, politics, and side characters that it ended up being very overwhelming and hard to follow. So SAID strips off a lot of this bloat to simplify and refocus everything to what really matters: the main characters, their motivations, their relationships, and their internal struggles. SAID will be a hybrid of slice of life and dramedy, balancing moments that advance the story with moments that slow down and show the characters hanging out with each other. SAID's synopsis is pretty much exactly the same as SSCC. Evolutions who are hurt from things that happened in their past, trying to live their day-to-day lives. But instead of all the drama and tension and meandering we see in SSCC, SAID's story is basically Blizz collecting friends like Infinity Stones. The goal is friendship! All of the characters are really flawed still, but due to these flaws, their clearer goals, and a more thought-out story, there will be a lot of character growth with them. Every plot point will be rooted in this character growth, and all main character arcs will be completely reworked to fit this. And yes, we'll get to see everyone in the cast develop, as this time I'm writing their arcs with each other in mind, so that every character will be important to each other's story in some way. In SSCC, the characters seem to just hate each other, with their relationships seeming to get more fractured and broken over time. And that stressed me out. Instead, each main character has something to learn about connection, themselves, and friendship. Due to this, throughout the story, they will grow as characters through it. And for people who are interested in the Eevee characters, the main plot will feature a select few Eevee characters, but the rest of them will mostly be regulated to the background and for comedy purposes. If my plans with said are successful, I'll look at doing things like mini-stories with more popular Eevees in the fandom. And of course, with the story changing, that means we have to look at the characters too. So next up are the character changes. We have a new main trio. Liz is still our protagonist, and Dusk is still here as a Duragonist, but Eve is getting kicked out the main trio, and Dawn is replacing her. Did anyone even know Eve was part of the main trio? Actually, Eve is getting kicked out the main cast entirely. Why? Well, for this story, she works better as a side character. Also, like, I don't know, man. A literal child constantly hanging around a group consisting of early to mid 20-somethings does not sound great to me. For multiple reasons. Now let's talk about Dawn. I always felt like she was a super interesting character, but she was never explored in SSCC, causing her to be less important than some side characters. I think she has a lot of potential, especially regarding her relationships, and I want to explore it properly this time. So, the reboot has 8 main characters: Blizz, Dust, Dawn, Vay, Bolt, Flame, Daisy, and Miku. And yes, Miku will be in the PC from the start of the series. Most characters will be getting redesigns, including the main cast and the Eevee characters. There will be plenty more updates and other character changes, so check out the SSCC Toyos page if you want to see them all. While you're there, if you have an account, favorite play. Instead, I'm making it so the screen time between the main characters is much better than it was in SSCC. Of course, Blizz as the protagonist will still get a lot of focus, but Dawn and Dusk will have around the same amount of focus as him, and all the other main characters will all on average have about the same amount of focus as each other as well. While all the main characters will have the same core personality they had in SSCC, there will be a few adjustments to better suit their circumstances in Ced's world. For example, Daisy! In SSCC, she's pretty, what even is her personality? Shy? No, Anyways, instead, she's a weirdo outcast loser! I mean, I guess all the main characters in Box 31 are weirdo outcast losers, aren't they? Character arcs for the main cast will stay relatively the same as they were in SSCC. This means there will be plot beats that are heavily reminiscent to plot beats in SSCC, but have been changed to fit more in with Ced. Additionally, key character relationships are staying mostly the same. So, to everyone who wanted Blizz and Vay to be happy together, I'm not sorry, cause that ain't happening. Lastly, Ced will have clearer character motivations. These motivations tie directly into each character's personality, and also helps drive the story further. That's all for the character changes. So, now let's look at the world changes. What am I changing about Ced's world to make it better than SSCC's world? Well, we're keeping the PC setting. It's essentially a small world with limitless possibilities. While it will be explored in the series, I'm planning on making a separate video later on to explain it more in depth. I'll be taking inspiration from things such as Ready Player One, The Sims, Minecraft, Animal Crossing, and MMOs, by adding things such as a leveling system, quests, a crafting system, and more. In line with keeping the same setting, the majority of the story will still be in Box 3, the Eevee box. The only major difference with the PC itself being that we're using Kalos' system, which has 31 boxes instead of 18. On the topic of Box 3 though, Box 3 is getting completely overhauled. This map here? Useless. I'll be redesigning and rebuilding the entire box from scratch. Instead of the box being empty, I want it to feel like a small town. It will be super fun. Oh, and remember that whole weird Brotherhood system from the original story? Yeah, about that. Have you ever tried to write a character pairing, but then you put all the girl characters in one family group, so none of the guys in that group can be in a straight relationship? Just me? As a kid, I came up with the Brotherhood system so I could ship the characters without it being weird. But, due to my lack of oversight, I didn't realize the actual implications of doing this. Anyways, we're getting rid of the Brotherhoods entirely! The Brotherhood system was interesting, but it caused too many issues that made things super messy. For example, the Brotherhood system let Vay, Dusk, and Bolt control everything in the entire box. Since both Vay and Bolt listen to Dusk, it really just made the Dusk being a tyrant problem way worse. I can also very safely say that I didn't want to write a political drama comic, and that's kind of what SSCC turned into. How am I fixing it? First of all, the Brotherhoods are being replaced with families. Characters will be born into these families, have parents and siblings, and there won't be any weird cult-like brotherhoods where all girls just join one group. So yes, that means girl Eevees aren't just limited to Greenpaw anymore. I can finally have Yuri, bro! To explain this change, the trainer on her shiny Eevee hunt now has multiple different breeding pairs. She picks up a random pair to put them in the daycare and they have Eevee eggs. There are now 6 families in total. The original 3, Ice Drop, Greenpaw, and Lightfire, and 3 new families, Birdsong, Moonshadow, and Umbel. Additionally, there is now the Wild group, consisting of Eevees that were caught in the wild or obtained by other means. They don't belong to any family by default, but can be adopted into one if they choose. Several characters, including Daisy, will be switching from their old brotherhoods to new families. For example, Daisy, Oliver, and Eve are now in Birdsong. And also, with the changes to families instead, I'm stripping away the leadership positions from the main cast completely. This is due to me trying to focus on character relationships, and not Eevee politics. Instead, the new leaders of the box are the parent characters who we will see in the series and you can check out on Toy House. Now, finally, let's talk about the lab powers. You know, those weird, confusing lab experiment abilities that the characters got. The powers are being removed, with some exceptions. SSCC is not a shonen. There's literally no reason for the lab powers to be in the series. All they did was just confuse people and muddy up the story, so they're mostly being removed. And yes, I did say mostly. If a power is important and tied to the character development of a main character, I'll find an alternate way to showcase it, one that is more in line with the series. But if not, they're not getting it back. So sadly, no magical girl Bolt. Now, instead of Eevees and Eeveelutions getting abilities from being lab experiments, any Pokemon can equip certain PC-only items to gain special abilities. That is, if they can get them. And also, the new PC-only leveling system can help them grow in power. If people are interested, I'll make a video explaining these later. So, what am I removing from the series entirely? Well, first of all, I'm removing the lab. Yes, I'm removing the lab completely. I know many of you love the mysteries behind the lab, I understand. Some of you even read SSCC specifically for the lab and its intrigue, but for one thing, the lab, despite being interesting, was the antithesis of what Stupid Short Eevee comic even stood for. I suppose that was the point of it, but at the end of the day, everything that happened in there was extremely dark to the point of being dark for absolutely no reason. And SSCC got really dark because of it. As I developed the lab, I kept adding ideas, not really realizing how much it would affect the story until it was too late. The lab was never meant to be the central focus of the story. It was only added to explain why Miku wasn't in the PC. But despite it being an afterthought, it gradually dominated the entire story. The natural endpoint of SSCC would have had to be the characters confronting the lab, which would have fundamentally changed SSCC from what it was supposed to be into something much darker, as that was what everything was building up to. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that while the lab storyline was very compelling, it was just not the right fit for SSCC. And I just don't like it. Next up on the chopping block, Play Pokey Magazine. I can explain. I'm removing Play Pokey because people are perverts. I'm removing Play Pokey because people are perverts! Whenever I draw Play Pokey, I think it's super funny. But then, the pervert name attacked. I had to be told by several people, several times, that others can even look at the covers and think anything other than, wow, that's hilarious! And that makes me uncomfortable. Play Pokey was supposed to be a silly parody, but as my art improved, people started to take it seriously. Far too seriously. I don't really want to make that type of art, so I won't continue it. Don't worry though, because we're replacing Play Pokey with romance novels! So Flame can be reading the most raunchiest, trashiest, zestiest fanfictions known to man, but I don't have to draw any of it. And it's more in line with his love of reading more than Play Pokey ever was. I win! And finally, I'm removing fan-made EVs and unimportant characters. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has submitted a background EV over the years. I genuinely appreciate you putting your time into helping me fill out the PC with your EV characters. But sadly, I'm going to have to completely stop accepting them. Why? Well, in the very beginning, I had a system for artists to pick background characters from the master EV list and make a design for them. These were characters that were already going to be in the comic, so I wanted help designing them. But one day, someone made an EV completely from scratch. I didn't really know how to tell them no, so that's how fan-made EVs became, quote-unquote, background EVs. For the sake of clarity, I will be calling them fan-made EVs for the rest of the video. After I accepted one of these EVs, I felt like I had to accept all the others that were offered. Over time, there were over 200 fan-made EVs! Over 200! That's like way too many characters to draw, especially with my own huge catalog of characters that I own. Due to this and a lot of other reasons, I'm getting rid of them. The only exceptions are 10 EVs that for personal reasons, I still have emotional attachment to. These EVs will stay for fun as background characters in the series, but everyone else is gone. This also means I'm not accepting fan-made EVs in the future, by the way. If you have a fan-made EV design that isn't going to be used instead, it's all yours. Please do whatever you want with the design you own. With all the fan-made EVs gone, that means I can give more attention to the actual background characters like Izzy, Jed, Shane, Connor, and the many other EV characters in the series. If you're curious about them, most of them are on Toy House or the new Master EV List spreadsheet. The cast is still admittedly pretty huge. Unfortunately, this can't be avoided because, well, the trader keeps breeding them! It's been 14 years, trader! You're not getting a shiny! Give up! Also, as I'm trying to keep important characters to a minimum, there are characters that need to be cut. Like, a lot of characters. Especially any of the ones that actively harm the story! So, now what? What's the future of SSCC? I want to be completely transparent with all of you about what's happening with the webcomic moving forward. I know this series means a lot to many of you, and you deserve to know exactly what's going on. I will be finishing the current chapter at some point this year. I know this timeline sounds vague, but I want to give the final chapter attention and care it deserves rather than rushing it. However, after this chapter is complete, there will be no new pages of SSCC. This is where the original series ends. I've considered releasing the rest of the story in some other format, but I've decided against it. The reason for this is that it would contain spoilers for the reboot, and I want everyone to experience these stories without knowing exactly where everything is headed. Unless you're active on the Discord or Twitch, because I have a big mouth and I can't help but spoil everything every chance I get. I'm trying to stop. I swear on Bolt's hairline, but it's hard! I know some of you might be worried about losing access to SSCC entirely. Don't be. SSEC is not being deleted. The entire series will stay available to read on all platforms it's currently on. That means you'll still be able to find it on DeviantArt, Comic Fury, and Webtoons. I'm also planning to update all of these platforms by the end of the year so that every version is fully up to date and easily accessible. This way, no matter where you prefer to read SSEC, you'll have access to the complete story. Except Newgrounds. Sorry, my dudes. Now, let's talk about the dub. The dub has been really fun to work on, but I've been too busy to give it the attention it deserves. We will be working on the next episode, but I'll also have to consider how continuing the dub might cause confusion once the reboot launches, especially since the reboot will also be on this YouTube channel. So, this video and the next dub episode's reception will help determine the dub's future. Comment down below with your opinions on what I should do with it. And thank you again with all of your support for the dubs, the PMVs, and the comic itself. Thank you! At the end of the day, I just want to bring joy to people. I started posting SSCC online because I wanted to make people smile, and that won't change. So, thank you. Thank you for reading, thank you for supporting me, and thank you for being part of this journey. I've kind of been brain rotting about the reboot and the characters for like the past year non-stop, and I just want the reboot out already so I can yap about them! I know this will be disappointing for many of you. Some of you have been here for a long time, cheering me on, celebrating the characters, and even creating fan arts and stories. stories, which I appreciate so much. I understand how much you've invested in this world, and this is not something I take lightly. Trust me, this reboot wasn't an easy choice. This story has been part of my life since I was 13. I grew up with these characters and pushed back thoughts of changing the story for years because of how attached I am to them. But I truly believe that this is the right choice for the story, the characters, and honestly, for me as a creator. I've been incredibly lucky to have all of you by my side throughout this journey. Your support shaped this webcomic into what it became, and I want to honor it by giving you something even better. I know this is a huge change, but please understand that this decision was made with the utmost care and with the goal of delivering a story that you'll be just as excited to follow as the original. Even though SSCC is ending, its spirit will live on with Zed. And if you don't like the direction the reboot is going, that's totally fine. I'm still incredibly grateful that you were here, that you read the story, and supported me. Honestly, to everyone, whether you've been here from the Smack Chiefs era or you joined recently, thank you. Your support has meant the world to me, and it's because of all of you that I want to create something even better. If you want updates on the reboot, follow me on these platforms or become a Patreon like these guys here. As for me, well, after the final chapter of SSCC is done, I'll be taking a break from posting content consistently. Like, a long break, more than a year. After posting SSCC weekly for over a decade, I really need to focus on some other things for a while. That includes improving my art, working on Zed, and catching up on some important stuff I've been putting off for years because of how much time SSCC took. During this break, I might still pop in from time to time with shorts, videos, or other things related to Zed or Evolves, but don't expect Zed to come out anytime soon. The reboot is still in development, and I want to take my time with the planning process. I don't want to repeat the problems SSCC had, so I'm being really intentional with how I approach Zed. In the meantime, the main places I'll still be active are on Toy House and the Patreon Discord server. On Toy House, I'll be slowly updating character bios and uploading character refs over time. And on Patreon, I'll be giving early updates on Zed's development, sharing character refs early, and posting behind-the-scenes content that I won't be uploading anywhere else. If you're a Patreon, please join the Patreon Discord. That's where most of these updates will go. As for the future of Evolves, I'm still deciding whether I'll keep it a comic or make it a YouTube series, and I'll probably make that decision once I'm deeper into Zed's production. I'll be making a separate announcement about it when the time comes. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. I'll be making a post answering them in the near future. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates. Thank you for the support! See you in the next video!